Hey everyone, welcome to the Let's Play podcast, episode 2. I'm Jonathan.
And I'm Charlotte.
And today we are talking about video games and
Audiobooks.
nice. And specifically the best video games to play while you're listening to audiobooks. So before we get into the games, Charlotte, first of all, how are you doing?
I'm great.
It's always good to hear.
Are you great?
I wouldn't say great. I'm between good and great. I thought to kick things off, we can first start talking about, just in general, how do you feel about playing video games and multitasking in general? Like, do you like to play video games and like listen to an audiobook or a podcast or something like that? Or are you somebody who just likes to kind of like focus in completely on the game you're playing?
I have never focused in on anything completely in my life. I always have to be multitasking, and I know this greatly upsets many people, but there are very few games out there that I have played and not, been listening to music or a podcast or an audiobook while playing. And what about you?
Wow. So wait, before we get into me, do you also do that with like other things like watching television or movies?
Yes.
God, it's blasphemy. Okay. Well, yeah, it's I'm actually like very different because I used to be very against doing anything while I'm playing video games. Like I was always the kind of person I like to kind of like completely focus on whatever's going on. I also think it's because I like a lot of story-driven games. So usually there's obviously like a lot to pay attention to, and I like to really hone in on, the sound design. And I'm a big fan of like video game music too. So I like to kind of really focus on that as well. But I will say, definitely since working here, where part of our job is we do have to read up a lot, especially when we're preparing for like different authors or different interviews or different kinds of projects that we're working on. I definitely started to come around with playing video games and listening to audiobooks at the same time. But for me, it's definitely like certain types of video games. Like if I am playing like a story-driven game where there's a lot of dialogue and just a lot of storytelling in general, I will always focus on the game. But if it's, and we're going to go into like the types of games that we think are best for audiobook listening. But for me, it really does depend on the type of game. It has to be something where I don't need to focus completely on like a narrative or some kind of like game mechanic that's very like mentally taxing.
Yeah, definitely. And I feel like kind of my experience with it also just comes up from how I grew up playing games, which was, on a lot of road trips and that sort of thing. And, in a household full of a lot of siblings. So a lot of the time, listening with audio wasn't necessarily an option.
Gotcha, yeah. Why don't we go through the types of video game genres and specific video games that we think will be well paired with listening to an audiobook?
All right. So are we listing all of the genres and then going into them, or are we listing the first genre and then going into that?
I think let's go through them one at a time, yeah, and then we'll go into the games as we go along.
All right, so our first up genre is open world games.
I think there's like a little bit of a caveat to this one because a lot of open world games, they do have storytelling elements to them. So for me, like, I wouldn't play the whole game while listening to a podcast, but I think in a lot of open world games, you get to certain moments where things open up and then, they open up a lot of collectibles and you kind of have that moment where you're like, all right, I'm going to take like whatever, like a few hours to just explore the map, maybe clear out some things or like, find a bunch of collectibles and then little mini games and things like that, whatever like the game has to offer.
Yeah, I feel like there's that kind of meditative process of when you finish the story of an open world game, you can kind of go through and explore and get collectibles. And there are definitely some games where it's more fun to do that than others, but it's kind of nice to do that kind of not super mentally taxing process of playing a game and collecting stuff, but also listen to an audiobook while you're doing it.
Yeah, totally. I think actually Ubisoft open world games lend themselves well to it because, like a lot of the Assassin's Creed games and also the Far Cry games, they have like really compelling stories, but they do a good job of like segmenting, okay, like here's a big chunk of the game where you can kind of just go off and like find a bunch of stuff and collect a bunch of things. Or usually there's like enemy hideouts that you can like clear out and things like that are sort of replicated throughout the map. And I'm the kind of person I usually at least like to start kind of clearing everything out. Sometimes I don't last throughout the whole game. But yeah, I think those are always like a really good opportunity to kind of like you're saying, kind of like meditate and yeah, it's just like a satisfying kind of thing to just like check things off. I guess it's like a task manager type dopamine hit that you get where you're just glad to like get everything done.
Yeah, that's kind of, so one of my games that is big for me for playing while listening to audiobooks is Genshin Impact.
Yeah.
And especially I have played Genshin since basically it launched, and it has daily things that you're supposed to do. So I kind of have a like routine of I do this every night and it takes this long. So it's nice to be like, it's not always, a game when there's not a story update. There's just like daily commissions you have to do. It's not very mentally taxing. So I have especially liked listening to kind of like YA fantasy books while I play it, because there's a lot of YA fantasy that I'm interested in terms of just kind of, the genre and the plots, but it's not necessarily something I have the time or want to commit the time to, sitting down and fully like reading on a page and like committing such a full chunk of my life to.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense too, because I think it kind of goes with the Genshin Impact sort of aesthetic. And yeah, that's a good point, because newsflash, at least I am not a YA. I'm probably a MA. But yeah, like those books, obviously, they're a little bit breezier to kind of, well, like I'd say most of them, I don't want to generalize completely, but a lot of them, they're just easier reads in general, especially in the audiobook fashion. And I feel like the YA books, a lot of them nowadays, they have a little bit more like creativity in the production value of how they're like put together. They might have like a little bit more music. They might have like different voice actors. So that's kind of a cool element as well.
Yeah, that's one of them I listened to while playing Genshin was the first Lockwood & Co. book, because I was always curious about it, but I never had time to sit down and read it. And I enjoyed the first one, and then I saw that they swapped narrators for the rest of the series, and I was like, oh no, my careful worldview has been shattered.
Yeah, for me, some specific games, definitely the Assassin's Creed games. I would say the one I would call out specifically is Assassin's Creed Rogue, which is probably the one that has the best like naval warfare. And it's funny because I was specifically playing that one because I had to get like a save up to date, because we were going to play that game with Jim Butcher. And so I actually played that while I was listening to the audiobook of Jim Butcher's latest book, The Olympian Affair, and actually the original one too, which is the Aeronauts Windlass, which is kind of like a steampunk fantasy series that he started writing, I think like maybe 10 years ago was when he did the first book. But yeah, that was kind of funny because it was sort of really meshing everything with our job together. And then I got sick for the shoot and Charlotte had to cover for me.
Yeah, it was the like funniest, worst tragedy that's ever happened on the video team, because Jonathan put so much effort into preparing for both our Jim Butcher shoot and our Christopher Paolini shoot, and then he got sick and he couldn't go to either. You like literally spent months preparing for Paolini.
It's okay. I had a feeling something like that was going to happen, but thank you for covering and for the rest of the team.
And
Very
it's
much
funny
appreciated.
because Paolini is kind of cursed on our team, because the first time he came here, when I started working here, I was excited to do an interview with him, and I got sick and couldn't come.
Oh man, we gotta prepare ourselves next time we invite him to the studio. But yeah, another good book to probably read with that specific Assassin's Creed game, I would say, is The Wager by David Gran, which is all about this kind of like murder mystery surrounding a mysterious shipwreck that happened in, I want to say it was like the late 1700s. And it was, I believe it was the English man of war that went missing. And and it's a very, very cool book because it's a true story, but the way David Graham writes, it's kind of like a mystery, and it's really like, he kind of gradually goes through each step of the journey and all the intrigue, and, there's a lot of naval warfare and a lot of I just like all the minutia and details around like ship life. And there's some really funny passages in it just about how awful it is in that life, like all the diseases people get, and like just, I think like half the crew members didn't even like want to be there. They had these people, I forget what they were called, but they were like these like rounders that went around England and just like literally just kidnapped people and made them forcibly have to like work on these naval vessels. This was like at the height of when I think England and Spain were fighting each other.
Yeah, that's a fun one to kind of go through the audiobook catalog of, is Eric Larson, because he has been doing books for so long, and we've been making audiobooks of his books for so long. So you can kind of hear throughout the different ones kind of, the technology getting better, the resources for recording those books getting better.
Yeah, it's like when you listen to like those live recordings of like Charlie Parker from like 1950s, and you can hear like the drummer like smoking a cigarette or
Is
like
this
in
what
the
you're
corner.
doing in your free time? A big one that we have both said we love, kind of go through an open world and listen to stuff is Jedi Survivor.
Yes, totally.
And we have, there are a lot of great Star Wars audiobooks out there. And of course, we have worked before with the legendary Mark Thompson.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought him up because like one of the cool things about our job is sometimes we record kind of like behind the scenes little featurettes from when audiobooks are actually getting recorded. And I got lucky because I think about maybe 3 years ago, we did sort of an origin story of Count Dooku from the Star Wars universe. And that one was like a really highly planned, I think it was an audiobook original. So it was like specifically made for audio. And they had like a full cast of actors. And when I went to record, they literally had like 4 or 5 different actors in the recording booth at the same time. And Mark Thompson was there. And he's so talented. It's so cool to like watch him work because he's doing like 10, 15 different Star Wars voices. And he just like kind of changes on a dime. Like he jumps from like Yoda to doing like Obi-Wan, and he does like little droids and does like all the beeping sounds. I remember specifically there was this like giant roach character, and he was like doing this crazy like clicking thing with his mouth, and I was just like standing there like in amazement.
Yeah, we recorded some story times with him right when the pandemic was hitting, so it was all remote recordings, but it was really fun getting those in, and also just like working with Lucasfilm because they sent us a whole folder of Star Wars sound effects, and it's so fun seeing like
awesome.
what Lucasfilm names is.
Oh yeah, what do they call the lightsaber whoosh?
I don't remember what it was called, but it was like something really silly.
Oh man, toothpaste expulsion. Pretty much like all the Star Wars audiobooks is they all have like so much music, and they really put a lot of effort into the sound design. So you can hear like spaceships coming in. If there's like a stormtrooper speaking, they do that sort of like robotic filter on their voice. And then of course, like the voice actors are usually very talented in like changing their voices and doing specific characters too, which is always pretty cool. And I think Sam Maggs's book, who wrote Battle Scars, which is kind of like the story between Jedi Fallen Order and Jedi Survivor, and that one also has that kind of like audio production value to it. But that one you can also get just regular, like as a regular book, right?
Yep.
Sweet. And you got to play Jedi Survivor with her.
Yeah, that honestly like has been my most favorite interview that I've done so far. And hopefully by the time that this video is going up, it will soon be out. Like it's currently out with Lucasfilm for approvals. So that's a big question mark right now.
It's always fun to deal with the big cheeses. Cool. So the next type of games that we thought would be really good to pair with audiobooks are, I'm calling them farming games. I think some other people, maybe they call them like task management games maybe. I don't know if there's like another better term for those.
Which, of course, the top of the list is the classic Stardew Valley.
Stardew Valley actually got me into those kinds of games. I always kind of just didn't think those types of games would ever be for me, but finally it just became like so popular. At one point I was like, all right, I'll at least check it out, and I got like completely hooked.
When I first played Stardew Valley, I was on a week-long vacation to visit my friend, and we were binge watching all the seasons of The Magicians, and I was just kind of playing it as that was happening. So I feel like kind of that fantasy genre and Stardew Valley are linked forever. And disappointment.
Can I ask you a personal question about Stardew Valley? Who did you romance, if anyone?
I obviously romance Shane because I can fix him. And I know if I play it again, I will once again romance Shane. Everyone I have interacted with at PRH who is a Stardew Valley fan is like, yeah, I go for Shane. So I don't know what this says about the publishing industry.
Well, maybe it has something to do because if people don't know, like you're also like the savior of lost birds.
Yeah, he has chickens. He brings chickens.
I see it. I see the psychology. It's all
I
making.
can
It's all
fix
clicking
him.
now. I just remember
who did
there's.
You go for?
Oh man, I don't think I remember her name, but she was like the artist. She's like a painter.
I see. It wasn't.
It wasn't a serious relationship. No, yeah, it was. What is her name? But yeah, she's the one. She's like a painter. I forget her name, and I think she has like her own cottage. Like I think it's near one of the barns, but she doesn't live in town. I knew that she was kind of like an outcast, which I kind of like. She's like a rebel.
So what sort of audiobooks do you go for while playing Stardew Valley?
Clearly, farming books. No.
Yeah, tell me all the farming knowledge you've learned.
Well, I was actually thinking stories about kind of like starting over in a new place, like maybe like Under the Tuscan Sun by Frances Mays, something like that, or even like maybe like Eat, Pray, Love, that kind of energy, like by Elizabeth Gilbert. I don't know if you agree, but yeah.
Yeah, I kind of like go to, that kind of cozy mystery genre, like
okay.
Richard Osman kind of. Because, I mean, Stardew Valley is wholesome, but, there's also kind of that, like, intrigue of, what is this town? What's everyone's secrets? That sort of thing.
Yeah. There's a little bit of David Lynch energy there, right? You kind of get into everyone's dark secrets.
Did you see that interview recently with Concerned Ape where he said he will only give movie rights to either Studio Ghibli or David Lynch?
I did see that, yeah. That's so funny. Can you imagine a Stardew Valley movie by David Lynch?
I can't, and that's why I want to see it.
You can also read or listen to The Fate of Food by Amanda Little. She talks about, I think, like sustainable agriculture and things like that. So that could be interesting if you really want to get into your like farming bag. I don't know why I leaned over when I said that. That was
You're like,
insider
this
is very important. Listen up.
Are there any other farming type games that you go to?
So one of my favorite farming, and like I said, like originally I hadn't played any of them, but once I played Stardew, I got a little bit hooked. So one I would love to call out, it's called Graveyard Keeper. And in this one, it's basically like similar to Stardew Valley, but in this one, you're a graveyard keeper, and a lot of the task management is about like exhuming bodies and like salvaging their body parts for strange purposes. And it's kind of like a medieval setting, and it has like a lot of dark humor, which I find like really, really funny. It also has like really, really beautiful pixel art too. Like honestly, like some of the best I've ever seen in a modern game. So I definitely would recommend checking that out. Plus there's a donkey that delivers the bodies that has a kind of like a political awakening in the middle of the game, which is very hilarious. And that's a great game. I think you would probably like it. You should check it out.
Yeah, and I mean, I definitely like, everyone loves a good Animal Crossing.
Yeah. See, I haven't played that, but
yeah, I will say I kind of had the reverse experience of everyone in the pandemic, where because the latest Animal Crossing, dropped right in April 2020, and I just was not in the mind space to play it then. So I definitely have not put as much time into that one as everyone else in the world did.
And is that very similar to Stardew in terms of like the game mechanics, or is it a little different?
I mean, it's less farming and more, kind of like foraging and kind of like building a home, that sort of thing. But it is kind of the same in that, you can put as much time into it as you want. You can play it a little bit every day. You can like spend hours in it, whatever you want to do. But
Nice.
I guess unlike Stardew Valley, which, it has like time passes in it, but it's, like many days can pass in one game session, whereas Animal Crossing is linked to like real time.
Oh, okay. See, that kind of gives me anxiety. I don't like that. I like to keep my game time and my reality time separate, personally. But have you ever played Spiritfarer?
Mm-mm.
See, that is a game I think you would love. Do you know anything about it?
No. I know the title now.
Yeah, so that one, it's also like a task management game, and the premise is that you kind of everything happens on this boat, and you're like adding like little workshops to help process materials and things. But basically, you're like ferrying people into the afterlife. You're kind of like, is it Charon or Karen, that Greek figure that kind of Karen? Sorry.
Thanks, disembodied voice.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, you're like he like retires, and you sort of like take up their mantle, but it's a much more. It's not like a Greek mythological setting. It's kind of like a cartoony setting. And basically like people, their spirits turn into these animal creatures. It's just very nice. You have to like sort of like make them comfortable in their last moments. And sometimes they ask you to kind of like fulfill like a dying wish, or they might have like regrets that they want to like just talk to you about. It's just like it's not a game that's like super focused on grief. It's more about like, has like a nice kind of cozy spin on like people's dying moments, and it has incredible music too, and it's got like a cartoony kind of aesthetic to it, and you get a pet cat, so you'd probably like that. I think you should definitely check it out. I really do think you'll really like it.
So next we have puzzle games, which I think is really a category that you are the king of knowing puzzle games.
Yeah, maybe. When I'm thinking about puzzle games, see, this is a little bit of a tricky one because I think if you're trying to multitask, there's certain puzzle games that might not be good because you're like, you're trying to think and work stuff out. So maybe like a game like Portal might be a little too much.
Yeah, like Portal's definitely a game that comes to mind, but I feel like that is an example of one where I probably wouldn't be multitasking just because it is such a like character dialogue driven type game.
Yeah. See, the game I was thinking of specifically is this game called The Witness by Jonathan Blow. I think it came out maybe 7-8 years ago. The premise of the puzzles, they're kind of like these panels that you have to like trace lines, but it's also like a full 3D open world. You're kind of like on this island. So there's a lot of just like quiet exploration that's happening as well. And it's a really like beautiful kind of cell shady kind of looking, colorful, vibrant world. And there's no music, but there's a lot of like nice subtle sound design. Has really good like footstep sound designs. You can really hear like all the textures differentiate when you're like.
I like that in a podcast where we're talking about the best games to listen to something else while playing. You keep being like, the sound design is amazing.
Maybe this isn't the best game. No, but the cool thing about that game is that you're obviously walking around, like you have like complete freedom too, so you can do things in a non-linear fashion, and you can really like take your time too. But yeah, like I think a big premise of that game is that you're working on these 2D panels, but a lot of times you have to factor in your environment. So you might have to look at, something on a tree or like how like a river kind of cuts through a mountain. And what's really cool is that it really factors in like perspective too. So it's not just looking at things, but it's looking at things from like very specific angles that sort of change how you interpret the world and how you interpret the gameplay. I think the game's like really philosophical too. There's kind of like audio logs that you can pick up every now and then, or like little interviews that kind of deal with like big philosophical issues about like, our place in the world and how the way you look at things sort of changes it and how you like seek truth.
Yeah, I feel like when I go to, puzzle game, I go real basic. Like
you don't go for existentialism.
Like my go-to back in college when I would have a 6-hour shift at the library renting out DVDs to people, I'd be like, okay, Samurai Sudoku, extreme difficulty. This will get me through this shift.
That makes a lot more sense, actually. I think yours makes more. Yours is probably way more appropriate than mine. Now I'm embarrassed to say that the other one is because that one's even more heavy. This one's called the Talos Principle, and this is also kind of like an exploration/puzzle game. And that one's completely, I think the theme there is like determinism and like free will, because there's a lot of like AI like robots throughout, and they're constantly contemplating like, am I alive? Do I have consciousness? And all this kind of stuff. And the puzzles are really cool too, because it's like kind of similar to Portal, where there's like lasers and I think like teleportation portals and things. And they actually just came out with a sequel. I think it came out like a few weeks ago. So I'm definitely going to check that out. But yeah, I was thinking like that would be a cool pairing with something like, I don't know, maybe you can like listen to Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, something where you can contemplate what it means to be human, or even something like really philosophical. Actually, a book that just came out, it's called Determined by Robert Sapolsky, which is all about determinism.
Oh, really?
Great title. So I don't know. I just like the idea of like pairing something like a really heavy like philosophical text with a very mindful puzzle game.
Yeah, it's funny. Like any puzzle game I think of that I enjoy playing, I'm like, it is one I focus more on because I'm thinking of like Professor Layton, and that is a series that's just so musically delightful, like voice acting delightful, and you kind of just want to like live in the art style. So it's not a great multitasking one.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like, there's no rules. You do whatever works for you. But yeah, anything else you want to say about puzzle games? Any other ones you want to call out?
No, I think we're ready to move on to our next category.
All right. So sort of similar to puzzle games, the next category is strategy games. And I think this one you might be a little bit more familiar with than me. So do you have anything you want to shout out?
So yeah, one strategy game that immediately comes to mind that's great for pairing with audiobooks is playing Civilization, whatever number of Civilization you prefer. I generally play 5, but it especially is fun to, kind of pair it up with a history book, something like Dan Jones, who writes a lot about, Europe in the past, those sort of things. It's kind of fun to, be learning about history while playing through history. And I'm sure people who are better at playing Civilization than me would be like, no, you need to focus on it. But I'm just there to have a good time and watch things happen. I'm not serious.
I like that idea of like coupling it with history books. Because history books is the kind of thing where, it's not like a plot that you have to follow. You can bounce around a little bit. You don't necessarily have to like do it in order. And
it's really nice when you get out of, school age and you can read or listen to books about history and it's not like, oh, I need to retain this information for a test.
Yeah,
like
true,
you're kind of
true.
just there because you want to learn. Like that's a nice phase to get to in your life.
Totally. And I find that helps you retain the knowledge better anyway when you don't have that pressure. And also you can kind of like experiment with ways that you learn yourself and how you process information. Like I think there's a word for it, but like people who remember things better when they write things down.
Yeah.
I'm definitely one of those people. So if I take like physical notes with a pen, I'm going to remember it much better.
Yeah, and I have always been someone who wants to get into like playing Crusader Kings, which is notoriously like a very hard strategy game to learn or like even.
I was gonna say that I was trying to think of the one I tried to play and I got terrified after like 5 minutes, and I'm pretty sure that was the one.
So I had the best experience of Crusader Kings 2 in that when I was playing it in college, I played it on my MacBook. And no matter what I did, it would crash 1 hour into the game, no matter like what I did. So I could play just enough to be like, oh yeah, I'm having a good time, and not any longer to, be like, and I have no idea what's going on. But yeah, it's great fun if you want to get really into like all the little things that like run an empire.
Yeah, I was curious. So in a game like Civilization, are you, in addition to like building up your empire, is there like military strategy in there as well?
Yeah, so there are basically, the different routes you can go for like the victory. So there's, like cultural, there's the
conquering I see.
Version.
Interesting.
So yeah, you can go like exploring, you can go cultural. There are different ways.
Yeah, because the strategy games that I like are ones that are strictly combat focused. So one that I played last year, which I loved, was Marvel's Midnight Suns, which is a little more micro. You're not dealing with gigantic armies, but you have like teams of like, maybe like 5-6 people. And that one's really cool because it combines characters from the Avengers, the X-Men, and also this other group, which I was less familiar with, called the Runaways. So you kind of mix and match different characters from that. And it's by the company that made the XCOM games, which I loved as well. And those just have like the most satisfying like turn-based strategy combat. And they add all those elements into Midnight Suns too. And then they have like a kind of like a card game factor into it as well, which I think like adds like the perfect amount of randomness to it, because you get like a different deck every time you engage in a battle. So you sort of have to like think on your feet every time and like try and strategize based on the powers that you have in your deck and the characters that you have, which I really like.
Yeah. So on the simpler side of games to play, I definitely like went through a Duel Links phase, which is, a app for playing Yu-Gi-Oh! And I mean, so my terrible fact is that I am a huge Yu-Gi-Oh! Fan. I have seen almost every episode of Yu-Gi-Oh! I fell off when it swapped over to the other studio with sevens. But yeah, I'm not good at playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Or building a deck, but I have played an obscene amount of Duel Links to unlock characters.
I think my nephew's getting into that, and I believe that because he was trying to teach me Pokemon and then also Yu-Gi-Oh! I think that's also similar, right, with like the monsters and stuff?
Yeah, I mean, Pokemon doesn't really fall under, strategy games, but it definitely is a great one to play and listen to something. And I mean, especially any of the older Pokemon where you actually had to, grind levels. It's a lot easier to level up your Pokemon nowadays in the newer games. But really, any of them, you can kind of like chill and listen to whatever you want.
Yeah. See, I was thinking of a funny pairing for like a strategy game, especially like a more combat one, would be like The Art of War by like Sun Tzu, and really like role play into it as if you're like a general, or even get really extreme and just fire up The Naval War of 1812 by Teddy Roosevelt. Not read by Teddy Roosevelt because I don't believe radio was invented until the late 19th century or any kind of audio capturing device. So the next category, I actually think this
looks so diabolical.
I actually think this next category is probably the best type of game for listening to an audiobook, and it's roguelikes. For a while, I thought it was roguelite with a T.
I mean, because that is something, because like Hades is a rogue rogue light, because
Yeah, because I thought it was like when people say like something's light, like Bud Light, you know, like it's the thing but not totally the thing. It's like kind of the
I
thing.
mean, like that is the meaning of rogues, like, because
Yeah.
it's not quite there, but it is.
But it is it is like with a K, though,
Yeah.
right? That's what people say. All right, glad we cleared that up. Anyway, the reason why I think those games are perfect, though, is because those games are all about like repetition and like fine tuning that perfect run. And for me, like actually, I think like listening to an audiobook would help me, because sometimes I get a little bit fatigued by the repetition of a rogue game like that.
Yeah,
But if I have something like I'm listening to, I think I'm gonna get like more and more into it. And then those games are kind of like naturally addictive anyway. So like that feeling of like, oh, just one more run, or I'm gonna get it right this time, I think that goes well.
Yeah, it's like they're addicting to an extent. It's like you want to do it, and then sometimes you hit a wall, and you're like, let's put this down for 2 years.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I think one that I loved was Hades. That was just a really great game. Not only the gameplay was like really fun, I really liked the art style, kind of like that cartoony-ish art style, but also just like the characters and the voice work in that game is like really compelling. And it's just like a really cool version of Greek mythology that I think is very unique.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like any Supergiant game is always really
love
fun.
their games. Yeah, I love Transistor.
Yeah.
And was it Bastion? Was that the first one they made? Maybe
Bastion, yeah.
Bastion, yeah.
And I've never played the other one that's like the sports.
yes. That one, I think is it called Pyre, maybe?
Yeah, Pyre.
Yeah, I did want to check that one out, because that one got good reviews as well. And yeah, their games usually have really good music too, which I love. And Hades 2 is in the works too, so I'm excited about that. That one, I believe you play as Melanoi, right? Mm-hmm. I think it's, yeah, so she's the Princess of Darkness instead of, is it Zagreus?
Zagreus,
yes. So that'll be interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like there's that whole subset of, people who are really into like Greek and Roman mythology.
Yeah, that's a whole lot. See, the thing is, I wonder if someone who's like really, really into it would enjoy that kind of game, or is it too much of like a alt take? I don't know.
Shalia says yes.
These are deep thoughts we have. What do you think, viewers? Yeah, I mean, like, do you think it's too heavy-handed to like pair that with a Greek mythology type book, or is there something more?
I mean, I know something that
literal.
we both put down on our list is like the Percy Jackson series, because it is another example of one where it's an interesting series, but it's not necessarily something you want to sit down and read physically when you are an adult with responsibilities and you have to get things done.
True. One thing I was thinking of, there's this cool book called Dolaire's Book of Greek Myths, and it's sort of like an intro to Greek mythology. But I think it's more for like younger readers. But if you're not familiar with Greek mythology, I feel like if you're a video game person, it definitely helps, because there's so many like popular games that are inspired by Greek mythology now. That's a cool one because it has like the audiobook version has like a really cool cast. It has Paul Newman, has Sidney Poitier, and Kathleen Turner doing like voice work in it. So that's good if you just want to like learn like the basics about like all the different gods and their relationship with each other and what they have like dominion over.
Also, a great reason to experience them in audiobook form is then you know how to pronounce them.
Exactly, yeah. That's actually one of the great benefits of audiobooks, just learning how to pronounce things properly.
Yeah, something I've become very aware of is when authors in their writing kind of sneak in a way to confirm how a character's name is pronounced. Like, I know we're both reading Black River Orchard by Chuck Wendig right now, and I definitely had a moment in the first few pages where the daughter's name is like Calla.
Oh, yeah.
And like her dad's nickname for her is Calla Lily, and that just kind of like helps you figure out how it's supposed to be pronounced.
That's true, yeah. One other cool audiobook recording I wanted to shout out too is Sir Ian McKellen does a reading of the Odyssey, which is really awesome. Because, he's got that Shakespearean, classically trained kind of delivery, and that's like perfect for an epic poem like that. So yeah, you can totally. That's a great way to experience the Odyssey, even if it's something you've already read. If you want to kind of like dive back into it, I would definitely recommend that.
Yeah, it's also funny because for the most part, celebrity, audiobooks, normally it's the LA audiobook team recording it, but there definitely are some who come to our offices and record them. So it'll be so weird when it's like, oh, by the way, Michelle Obama's on the floor today because she's recording her audiobook.
See, the thing that I love about recording voice actors or just like people performing or like recording the audiobooks in general is like, you know, in our job, we get privileged because we get to meet a lot of like famous authors and sometimes celebrities that have written books. But to me, it's like a way bigger thrill to actually record them like doing their thing. So instead of just like answering interviews, if they're actually like performing. So I'm trying to think of a few examples.
Yeah, I mean, because I recently recorded Gerard Doyle for
Yeah.
Mertag, and it's really interesting because, you know, like say a voice actor for like a show or something would probably record like lines. If they're doing multiple characters, they would probably do all the lines, you know, as one character and then swap to like doing the other lines as another character. But just kind of watching him read and swapping between, oh, this is my narrator voice, and then he goes into his dragon voice for Thorn, and then like into his Murtagh voice. I'm like, how are you doing this so seamlessly?
I wish I could have seen that actually. Now I'm very curious of how he does that because I did listen to, I've listened to a few of the Aragon books in audiobook. He does such a great job, and he has such a cool voice for the different dragons. It's kind of like a mix of like Yoda and DMX or something. Rest in peace, both of them. But yeah, it's just like cool how he can like spin on a dime like that. The sequel to The Handmaid's Tale, Testaments, which is right there, they did a really like elaborate kind of audiobook production for that one. They had Mae Whitman record a character in that. They had Dallas Bryce Howard record a character for that. And then they had, this is the one I was most excited about, they had Ann Dowd. She plays Aunt Lydia on the Handmaid's Tale TV show. But I'm a huge fan of hers because I love The Leftovers, that show on HBO. But it was really cool to see her because I got to record her while she was doing some lines for that recording. And she's such a nice person. And to see her kind of like snap and like go right into Aunt Lydia mode where she's like terrifying and menacing, like that was so cool to see. And then Dallas Bryce Howard was really cool too. I got to record her as well. Oh, were you on that shoot?
No,
I think that was...
but I've done like marketing videos I remember that need her approval, and
yeah,
it was a whole thing.
Okay. But yeah, very, very nice in person. And yeah, it was really cool to see her perform. Didn't you record Lucy Liu?
Yeah, I did get to go record Lucy Liu. She recorded at a studio downtown, and she was like so nice. And I remember that she complimented my cat bag, and my mom like went back to the Etsy shop owners like reviews and was like, I can't tell you who, but a celebrity really liked your bag.
Lucy Liu loves you. She has an endorsement. That's so funny. I still need to read that book, Our Missing Hearts. I definitely want to check that out because I'm a big Celeste Ng fan.
Yeah, I have read all her other works, but not this latest one. And I mean, I really love her stuff in general. It's all like beautifully sad.
Yeah. She definitely has that corner. I think what's funny is you and I made the same mistake as when we ordered our copies of that book. We accidentally got the goofy like large print version.
Yeah, so we generally have an employee like free book ordering period like 3 or 4 times a year, and you can pick like 10 books from a list of pre-approved books. But sometimes they trick you and it's the large print version and it's awful.
I know, it's so funny because as soon as you open it up and it has that giant sticker on it and you're like, God damn it.
Yeah, so our final genre is platformers. And do you have a platformer that is your ultimate go-to here?
I'm a big fan of the Mega Man games. Pretty much all of them. Probably say my favorite is Mega Man 2. I think that's probably like the consensus opinion. A lot of people love that one. Yeah, there's just something so, like it's like slipping on an old shoe. You know, you kind of jump in and it's like the rhythm of the game, the music of the game, the whole like mechanic of like stealing the weapons and using them against them I love. And that kind of thing just like never gets old. And I feel like the Mega Man games, they're always like that right perfect mix of challenging but not frustrating. And those are games that I also like to kind of challenge myself and I wouldn't say like speed run them, but I like to try and get through them in like a certain amount of time. And also they're games that I like to play like multiple times too. So I think that's perfect for multitasking and listening to something while you play them.
I will say this in every video that I can, that Psychonauts is my favorite game franchise of all time. And that is kind of one where I'm like, I do fully commit to experiencing it and not multitasking, I guess, just because like I love the music, I love the characters. It's a good time.
Another one that I really like, though, that I think would be good is this game called Celeste, which is, have you played that?
I haven't played it, but I've like seen a good portion of it.
Yeah, that one's really cool because that has the old school 2D pixel art style, but it's also really challenging. You're basically like this young woman who's climbing a mountain, but there's a lot of intersection with like her inner demons and dealing with her like anxieties about life, but it's not like heavy-handed. It's kind of just like given to you in like little bits and pieces of dialogue, but it's really, really hard. There's a lot of like really cool mechanics in the game, and it has just like really tight, satisfying controls too. And a lot of the sections can get like very lengthy too, so you can zone out to something else while you're doing it as well.
Yeah, and that's kind of like Sonic kind of has a sliding scale of when I would classify it as a platformer or not, because like especially some of the classic Sonics are not, but it kind of...
That's interesting. I mean, I would say the old Sega Genesis ones are platformers, you wouldn't?
I guess like some parts yes, some parts no.
I kind of see what you're saying though, because it's not the kind of thing where you're like, because in a platformer you're usually a little bit more methodical. You're kind of like timing your jumps and things, whereas Sonic, you're just kind of like blitzing through everything.
And I mean, I know that's basically a problem with Sonic games for basically since Sonic has existed, where it's like everyone has a different opinion on what like Sonic should be, how fast you should go, how like much you're controlling versus like Sonic.
Yeah, that is an interesting debate to have, because I haven't played that many of the recent ones. But is it Sonic Frontiers? Is that the last one that came out?
Yeah, I played some of that. I got it on the Switch, which was a mistake, but it was the holidays and I was traveling. But yeah, I enjoy watching people play Sonic. I'm not good at playing Sonic.
Yeah, I think my favorite is still Sonic 2. I really like that one. And that one has Tails. I like Tails, the little fox with the double helicopter tails.
I used to play the first Sonic like during school when I was in college because I would just put like the emulator on my flash drive.
One Sonic I actually really liked, it was kind of a weird one. It was called Sonic Spinball, I think, where it was like he's like in a pinball.
Oh, Sonic can get weirder than that.
Yeah, I guess so. That one was really hard though. Excuse me. And that wouldn't be a like platformer, but it definitely had that kind of energy of like, oh my god, it takes you like I think there's only like 4 or 5 levels, but they take you like a really long time to finish each one. And it basically like works exactly like a pinball, like a really, really elaborate sort of like pinball set piece or something.
In my mind went Super Monkey Ball and then Katamari, and I'm like, Katamari would be a great audiobook one because it's another one of those like you just chill and do whatever as you roll stuff up.
I'm not familiar with that one. No.
Oh my god.
Yeah, I don't think there's any type of book or specific audiobook that would make sense for like platformers. Does anything come to mind for you?
I feel like you kind of can do whatever you want.
Yeah, this one's like more of a loosey-goosey category. So yeah, just play jazz. Another thing we like to do on our podcast is sort of have like little hot topic-y discussions / debates. And I thought for the first one, we sort of dived into a few of these topics already, but if we can just talk a little bit about the types of audiobooks that we like, specifically like how we listen to them, what types of performances and productions we like. So I thought we can kind of like go into that a little bit. So why don't we start with a big one with the voice acting? Because I feel like there's 2 schools of thought on this. Some people like when the acting is almost like kind of in neutral, where they're not emoting so much, they're not like doing a bunch of crazy voices, and they're kind of keeping it at an even keel, because I think the theory is that, okay, you want to mimic the idea of like reading a book where you are sort of filling in the gaps with your own imagination. And then I think the other school of thought is that you just want, you want all the bells and whistles. You want people to be doing crazy voices and all the different accents and, really emoting as if it was like a film. You want like sound effects, explosions, music, and all this kind of stuff, which are out there. So I'm interested, where do you fall in?
Yeah, I mean, I think it obviously begins with the caveat of it depends on the book that you're experiencing the audiobook of. But I definitely feel like I'm at least, a bit on the scale of, I don't want, just, someone with a nice voice reading it. Like, it should be like the performer should be adding something to the experience, because there should be a reason why you want to pick the audiobook over just reading it. Like, why would you pick this over, just having someone read a book out loud to you?
Yeah, for me, I'm the same way, because I like the performative aspect of audiobooks. Definitely with audiobooks, I tend to do like more fiction. I mean, I love when there's like there's like really good actors, and I really like the ones that have like a diverse and like multiple characters or multiple actors in it, where they kind of bounce around and you can kind of get like those different perspectives. Yeah, and I love I love when they have like music in them. I love when they have sound effects and they kind of like add the mood. Because when I listen to an audiobook, a lot of times like I do just kind of like focus on that. I'm not always like multitasking. I think the thing with like why some people like the neutral ones is because they like swear by the multitasking, where they're like, they're washing dishes, they're cleaning their house, they're driving, they're doing all these things. So maybe I could understand that. Maybe you don't want like laser beams going off and explosions in the background while you're doing that.
Maybe
so I can kind of
do.
appreciate it. Yeah, that's true. One of my favorite voice acting performances in an audiobook is in the Game of Thrones books. There's a British actor, his name's Roy Dotrice. Sadly, he's passed away, but he did the first 5 books in A Song of Ice and Fire. And he does like an incredible job. He's one of those people, he does like all these different voices. He does like Daenerys and Tyrion and all the different characters in Game of Thrones. And they just have like such a great like flavor to them too. They're like voices that I've never really heard anywhere else. And he's a great actor. And what's cool is that he actually had like a guest starring role in, I think it was season 2 of Game of Thrones, the TV show. I believe he played like a pyromancer. So they gave like a little nod to him. And yeah, he's just like, he was a really great actor. And I just really wanted to shout that out. Another thing about audiobooks is the speed. Do you think it's like blasphemous to pump up the speed past like a certain point? Are you losing the performance after you get to a certain point? Or like, what are your thoughts on the speed?
I feel like my takes on hot topics are always like, I personally don't like to increase the speed because I do feel like it messes with the performance, but I understand why people do it. So
no, you need to take an iron fist, Charlotte.
I need to personally
They are wrong.
beat up
Everyone is
every
wrong.
single-
I think my sweet spot is 1.2. And honestly, for me, it does depend on the actor, because some actors, they just naturally speak a little bit faster. So there have been some where I keep it at the regular speed. But sometimes there are actors that, they take their time, they kind of do their thing, and I appreciate that. But,
Which,
move things along a little bit.
It is funny because it's like when I'm editing, video content, I'm like 2x speed.
Yeah, I'm the same way, yeah. Now, are you the kind of person, are you one of these crazy people that also like watch TV shows at like accelerated speeds? Because there are people like that.
I mean,
good.
I'll watch like a YouTube tutorial at it.
That makes sense. I do that a lot, yeah. It's very handy for anything like instructional. So I think that racks any other audio production-y topics. No. All right. I think that look means no. All right. We have one more hot topic though. This is not quite related to audio, although we are gonna we'll see. It'll get into audio. But I wanted to also talk about gaming pet peeves. And I'm sure all of us out there have our own little pet peeves when it comes to gaming. I'm curious, Charlotte, do you have any gaming pet peeves?
Yes. So specifically relating to audio and how games will do audio logs, 2 specific games that come to mind are BioShock and Borderlands, where you'll, get the audio diaries, or like you'll get, someone calling you on the radio. And so often it'll be right when you're in the middle of a giant fight. I'm like, stop! I can't enjoy anything that's happening.
Yeah, that's weird. Yeah, that can definitely hurt with the immersion, or just become disorienting after a while. I wonder if you probably know more about game development than I do, but I wonder if there are like technical limitations in terms of like being able to sort of predict when is a bad time to play like an audio log and when is, like, because I'm sure games have some kind of like checkbox where like, okay, I'm in combat now kind of thing,
Obviously, they don't want to have nothing happening in the game while you're listening to these things, but it's kind of like just figuring where to place it with that sort of.
Yeah. I'm interested. I would like to interview like a developer about, or like a game designer in terms of like how they strategically place those types of little like text things or like audio things that you can find throughout a game, and like how they sort of decide those things. It's funny that you mentioned audio logs because I had a pet peeve about audio logs too, but it was a little bit different. See, my pet peeve with audio logs is that I hate when you get an audio log, but in order to listen to it, you have to like either open up a menu or you have to be like within proximity of the source. So you mentioned BioShock. See, I think BioShock does it well because when you get an audio log in BioShock, you can like continue to explore and do your thing.
Yeah, it's great a lot of the time. I just don't like when it happens, like they place it right, where a giant fight is happening.
Yeah, I think that's more about placement. But I do like the freedom of being able to listen to it. I think Horizon, both Zero Dawn and Forbidden West do it where like when you get an audio log, you have to like be where you found it. So if you start walking away, it like stops. And I hate that because then I'm just standing there like in this empty room listening to this thing when I could be doing something else, which I don't like. I think the Batman Arkham games do that too, where they have really cool, I think in that game they have like therapy session recordings of the different supervillains, which is like super cool, but you have to open up a menu and like stop everything to listen to them, which is a little bit of a drag, personally, I think.
Yeah, and that's another audio thing that bugs me in Baldur's Gate 3 is you have,
Trouble in Paradise?
You have your like companion dialogue that happens, as you're exploring the map, but the subtitles for that dialogue is over, the characters' heads.
Oh, yeah.
And I think it's probably easier to see when you're playing on PC, but sometimes like, because I'm playing on a PS5, I'm not looking at the characters because they're behind me and I can hear that they're talking, but I can't quite, I want to see the subtitles. Let me put the subtitles on the screen.
Gotcha, yeah. So are you a person that always puts the subtitles on in a game?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't want to, but I feel like they kind of have to.
I mean,
yeah.
I turn subtitles on for everything.
Oh, really? Oh,
yeah.
Okay. I only really do it for video games. And that kind of leads me to my second pet peeve, which is about audio balancing in general in games. And here's one where I'll fully admit that I'm like kind of out of my depth. So as I start complaining about things, people might say, well, you actually can't do that because X, Y, Z. And okay, fine. I'm willing to be educated on the topic. But just from a purely like, fan perspective, what I hate is that there is no audio balancing in video games. Like they give you the control, right? Like usually if you go into the options menu, you can tweak the sound effects volume, the music volume, the dialogue volume, and like an overall. But see, I think part of it is because both of us kind of have like a video editor sort of background. So if you're mixing a video, you're controlling the levels of all the things in a dynamic way so that it's always as clear as possible. So like if you ever like watched a movie trailer is like a good example, they'll have like clips of the movie where people are talking and then they'll be playing like music from the trailer. But if you listen carefully, you'll hear the music and the sound effects go down when there's dialogue. And it's like that with a film too, usually. And I know this from like editing is like, your music tracks, your dialogue tracks, they'll be constantly like going up and down so that you're controlling what you want the audience to focus on. Whereas I feel like in video games, it's just like a mess. Like everything's at like 100% volume all the time. So I hate when I'm like in like an intense boss fight, but there's like important dialogue happening and I can't hear anything because I'm smacking like a sword against something or there's like really dramatic music playing. So it's because of that why I always use the subtitles. It's just because I wouldn't be able to hear anything. I would prefer not to, but yeah. So I'm interested if that's like if there's a technical reason why they do that actually. So if there's any developers out there, please enlighten us.
That's what our next developer interview will be about entirely.
What's the deal with audio balancing? So what do you feel about that? Do you have any strong opinions?
I mean, I feel like it also kind of like loops back into my complaint about, like don't be playing my audio logs while crazy stuff is happening in a game.
That's a good point. It might also be just the thing about like writing it. So maybe don't have like important dialogue be communicated while you're being chased by a boulder or something. That's a good point too. Cool. Any other pet peeves that you have?
Not that come to mind immediately. I'm always ready to complain, so I'm sure things will surface.
Okay, I have one more I want to talk about. And this one I'm interested what people in the chat or in the comments might think about this. But my big thing is like, and it's very prevalent in video games, but it's, I guess I'll call it like detective mode. And I don't know what game started this. I want to say it was the Assassin's Creed games, because I feel like in the first one, you had like assassin vision or something, where you can like, you click a button and then all of a sudden there's like an ugly gray filter on the game and like the enemies are like glowing red or something, or you can see through walls. I think another one that made it very popular was the Arkham Batman games, where I think they specifically call it detective mode, where like, you hit a button and all of a sudden like you have x-ray vision, you can like trace people's scents throughout the world and stuff like that. And I hate this. I hate it so much because number one, I just feel like x-ray vision is just, it's like too much. It's like too much power and it makes things a little too easy. But the other thing about it I don't like is that, you spend all this time making your game look beautiful, and then you're gonna force me to play half the game with this ugly Instagram filter on it where everything's like purple and yellow, and I don't even like see characters, I just see their exoskeletons or something. And I don't know, I just don't like it. In The Witcher 3, which is a game I really, really love, they have like your Witcher sense. And the cool thing about that game is like, you're kind of like a medieval fantasy detective, right? You're like monster hunting and you need to like track footprints or track little remnants of animals and different monsters. But in the game, you kind of like have to turn on this Witcher sense. And again, it's like, it makes footprints like glow in the dark. And there might be like a dragon scent in the air that you have to kind of like follow. And I don't know, like me, I like to just like look at the world as it is, and because it's not like you can't see that stuff without the filter. Like you can see all the clues. And I don't know, I just feel like it kind of cheapens the experience and it makes things a little too hand-holdy in my opinion. Like I feel like, especially now that games are much more graphically impressive and realistic, we can retire that mechanic, I think. We don't need that anymore.
I'm going to let the comments handle this one.
You don't have any opinions on that?
But while we're talking about glowing red, let's all take a moment to appreciate this little like Michael Bay-esque
oh, yeah,
red
nice
lens flare happening over here. We love it.
Have like a fight scene in here, like John Wick. Should get the strobe going. All right, so that's it for our hot topics. If you have any topics you would like us to discuss, definitely let us know in the comments, or you can email us at letsplay@prh.com.
And
right?
if you want to continue the strange list we're collecting of celebrities that people say we look like, please continue.
Oh yeah, what was the last one? Vin Diesel and Daisy Ridley,
yes.
As I saw. That was. We could do worse. We could do worse than that. So I'm not too offended by that. All right. So our next topic is any video games that we're playing right now that you want to kind of shout out.
Yeah. So I am obviously very slowly working my way through Alan Wake 2, but I also just wrapped up playing Return of the Obra Dinn with my friends.
Oh, what did you think of that?
Yeah, it was fun. It was funny because my friend was playing it and streaming it, and it is not a game that likes to be streamed.
Oh, really? Oh.
But yeah, is there anything you're playing?
I love Return of the Obra Dinn. That's one of my favorite games.
I'm like, it would not be a good one for listening to an audiobook. Huh?
No, you really gotta focus in that game. But that's part of the reason why I love it, because it's so like, we don't have to get into it, but it's a great game. You should definitely check it out. Yeah, like you, I was playing Alan Wake 2. I did finish it, and it is awesome. I do love it. Definitely easy Game of the Year contender for me.
I don't think it's easy to pick Game of the Year at all this year.
Yeah, there are a lot of great games this year. This is probably one of the most loaded years I could remember, to be honest.
It's that we're out of the pandemic and can make things again.
Yeah, that's probably exactly what it is. But I mean, Alan Wake 2 is just, it's amazing. One of the things that I love so much about it, and I won't get into like the details of the plot, it's so like relentlessly ambitious and innovative in like everything that it does. It kind of reminds me of like an art house film where like every scene, every shot, the director's like trying something new and they're trying to do something like a little bit unexpected or a little bit more ambitious in terms of like, being creative or being artistic. And, maybe everything doesn't work, but like out of every 10 unique things they do, like 7 work or 8 work. And it's just like that kind of thing. Like even like the titles, the way that dialogue is delivered, the way that you like kind of like navigate the world, the way that the story is told, it's like always doing something interesting. And I just love that. It's like kind of like inspirational. It like makes me want to like do more stuff in my own creative endeavors. And yeah, and it looks incredible. Like this game has the best looking trees I've ever seen in like any game. I don't know what they did.
Jonathan's tree ranking.
I have never
podcast
seen trees
episode.
look so good in the game. Like there are literally parts where I'm walking around, I'm just like looking
I
up
love
the
that you're
entire
having
time.
the like Dale Cooper experience, but for a video game.
Yeah. Great coffee, Diane. Is it Diane? Charlene? What's the name of his assistant?
It's Diane.
Diane, yeah. But yeah, just a great looking game. Very cool acting and just like really great music too. I love like the musical choices they made in the game. And one last thing I'll say about it, I just love the pacing too. It has that sort of, it has like a literal episodic feel too, like the first one if you've played it.
Save it for the Alan Wake 2 episode.
True. Yeah, all right. I'll tone it down. But yeah, I just love that rhythm where it's like, it's like a good book where every chapter kind of ends on like a little cliffhanger.
Oh, like a book.
Yeah. But yeah, it's just like it gives you like a natural stopping point, but it also like encourages you to kind of keep going. And I love how like there's like a little like musical kind of like ending after each chapter, like you just watched an episode. It's high class entertainment. I'm a big fan.
You're gonna go from this and be like, and I'm also playing Spider-Man 2, and it's fine.
The thing, I mean, since you brought it up, yeah, it's funny because Spider-Man 2 is such a change of pace from Alan Wake 2, and I haven't finished Spider-Man 2 yet, but I am like working my way through it. I love that too.
Yeah, I'm hoping to like get a chance to play it once I finally finish Baldur's Gate 3. Yeah. I'm in Act 3 now.
I need to. Unfortunately, I think I kind of given up on my Baldur's Gate 3 save. I'll probably have to start over again. But I did get really far into it.
I mean, it's going great for me. I made my boyfriend get bullied into going on stage, and then a clown attacked him. And his opinion of me dropped from very high to high because I did that. There's a
lot of hilarious moments in Baldur's Gate where it's just like, you'll be like in like some cavern. It's like, do you want to do this? Do you want to like stick your finger in that? Do you want to lick it? It just keeps going and going. And I always like go to the most outrage. I push it as far as I can. It's just so funny when your companions like start reacting to you and they're like, what are you doing, man? Like, just stop. I'm like, no. But yeah, Spider-Man 2. Did you like the first Spider-Man on a PS4?
I liked it. It's definitely, like not top game of all time, but I enjoyed it for what it was when I played it.
That was kind of my feelings about it. I liked it, didn't love it. So I would say that sort of tapered my expectations. Tapered my expectations. What is tapered?
It's not a word.
Thinking of like Jake Tepper from CNN. I'm all over the place. We'll have to. Anyway, tapered my expectations for Spider-Man 2, which I think helped because usually when I have lower expectations, I end up liking the thing more. So I actually I'm loving Spider-Man 2 as well. I think it's actually quite a bit better than the first one. And one of the things that I think is so surprising about it is like the story is awesome. It's just, again, it's like very well paced. I would say this story is much more of like a slow burn, where it is a very big shift from Alan Wake 2, which is like very like gloomy and dark. And this one like is just a little bit more upbeat. There's a lot more like vibrant colors and like, I wouldn't say it has that Marvel movie type vibe to it, although I think some people think that. I think it has like it does a good job of balancing like the light moments with the serious moments, but it's one of those games like as you slowly play more and more, it just keeps getting better and better, and it gets a little bit more intense. And I think I'm getting towards the end, and it's like really picking up. And yeah, it's awesome. I love it.
That just makes me think of how like watching Loki and being like, why is this conversation happening in like a suburban neighborhood? Like the most beautiful shot I've ever seen. What's happening? But yeah, cool. Games, great.
Any other games you're playing?
No. I mean, I try to be like, focus on get through one thing, and it just so happens that Baldur's Gate 3 is focus on it, and it, like I feel like I've played it for like 70 hours at this point. Yeah,
with Baldur's Gate, it's like focus on this game and maybe quit your job. That one's a real time crunch, but it is awesome though. I do love Baldur's Gate. All right, what are we reading? Or what are you reading, Charlotte? Anything good?
Yeah, so I have a couple of books that I've been really enjoying that I have been reading because of shoots. Like we just had Holly Gramazio, whose book The Husbands comes out in April, which is a long ways off, but it's a really fun read. And I also just picked up This House of Grief by Helen Garner because I just did a long form interview of her, and I didn't need to read it. The interview's done, but it just sounded like a really interesting kind of true crime story. So I'm excited to get through that. And then another book I just picked up is Jonathan Abernathy, You Are Kind, which is kind of, I don't even know that much about it, but I read a social media thread about it, and I was like, oh, this is intriguing to me. So I'm interested to read it and learn more about what it's about.
Nice. I think in preparation for this podcast, but also just because it was October and there was a lot of like Halloween-y, horror kind of centric things we were doing in our jobs for video in general. Like I was reading a lot of horror books, and I was also listening to a lot of horror books. So yeah, there's actually a bunch. I mean, I listened to Carrie by Stephen King. What was cool about that audiobook production is Sissy Spacek does the narration, and if you don't know, she starred as Carrie in the Brian De Palma version of the adaptation of that. I think it came out in like maybe the late 70s, I want to say. So it's kind of interesting because obviously when she was in that movie, she was much younger because, you know, Carrie's a high school student, but now she's much older. So it's like, it's almost like the character, an older version of the character is like reflecting back on the story. It kind of has this like weird meta thing going on. And what's cool about Carrie too is I think it's Stephen King's first book, if I'm not mistaken, or his first novel that was published. And that one is told from like different points of view too. And which I think always lends itself well to an audiobook recording. And she does like a really, really great job. And she's doing like different characters quite well. So that one I kind of want to shout out. I had read it before, but I did the audiobook version of Beloved by Toni Morrison. And one thing I have to say about Toni Morrison, if she didn't want to be an author and wanted to be a voice actor, she would have been just fine. Because she has like the most incredible voice of like almost any voice actor I've ever heard. And she does like just a really good job performing. It's just like, I don't know how to describe it. It's like so rich and like colorful and like hearty the way she kind of like performs. It's like, you really do have to kind of like experience it, I think. So if you're like a Toni Morrison fan, I definitely recommend checking out some of her audiobook versions. And the great thing is I think she's done recordings of almost all of her books too. So, you know, whether it's like The Bluest Eye, Song of Solomon, Jazz, like, you know, I'm pretty sure like they're pretty much all available in audiobook form. So definitely recommend those. And yeah, like you, I am making my way through Black River Orchard, which I think you're a little bit farther along than I am. But yeah, I love it. It's really cool, very unique. And I like that kind of modern / rural kind of setting because it's a world that I'm not very familiar with. So I do like to kind of dive into that.
Interesting.
Yes. All right. We're coming to the end. Finally, are there any upcoming videos that we're working on or videos that we finished that are going to be coming out on the channel soon that you want to mention?
When is this podcast going up, Jonathan?
That's a good point. Well, we're recording it on November 10th, the year of our Lord, 2023. I think the podcast will probably go up within the next 2 weeks. So it'll probably go up like mid to late November. So I know you did a really cool video, which we kind of talked about with Jim Butcher, playing Assassin's Creed Rogue.
Yeah, we've got that. We've got some D&D authors playing Baldur's Gate 3.
Yes, I'm very interested. I haven't watched that. I'm very curious about that. That's it for our episode. We hope you enjoyed it. If you have
hope you hated it.
But yeah, if you have any suggestions, comments about like any topics that you wanted to have us discuss in the future, definitely let us know in the comments. Obviously, if you like this video, please like and subscribe to check out more authory, booky, video gamey videos on this channel.
And of course, if there are any authors you want to see playing a specific game, specific author, specific game, vague concepts, we're happy to hear those. Do not tell us to have George R. R. Martin play anything. It won't happen.
We say that, or you say that, but I'm still,
it won't happen.
Fingers crossed. One day. We see you, George. We see you.